warning viewers about December 21st, 2012. That's the date that many doomsday prophets are claiming the world as we know it will end.
The date has suddenly captured the world's attention, though it was left over 2,000 years ago, as the end date of the ancient Mayan calendar. Now, however, as that date approaches, word is spreading and concern is growing about what the end of the Mayan calendar will bring.
It's supposed to be the end of the world.
The world will end in 2012.
I've heard it's supposed to be a cataclysmic event.
There's the book, the 2012 Apocalypse.
Hundreds of books, thousands of web pages, numerous TV specials, a Hollywood feature film, and New Age conferences, all focused on this date, have now exploded onto the scene of what has become a 2012 phenomenon.
They gathered today at a conference in Hollywood where they say some big changes are coming.
There are many theories.
The new era.
The major shift.
But the most prominent theory of all is that the end of the Mayan calendar marks doomsday.
Experts tell us there's scientific evidence that 2012 could mean big trouble for old Mother Earth.
It's supposed to be the end of the world. It's all over the place.
The world's supposed to end in 2012.
Now, where'd you hear that?
The Learning Channel.
I'm Sean Paul. I love mysteries and exploring the unexplained because I believe there is an answer behind every mystery if we dig deep enough. And when I first heard the Mayan calendar ends in 2012, I needed to know why. Why would their calendar just end? Does it really mean that something catastrophic is about to happen to the 7 billion of us living on Earth? Clearly, the end of the Mayan calendar marks the end of something. But the end of what? Let's uncover this mystery. Let's follow the clues. Let's talk to the leading experts and discover the true meaning behind the end date of the Mayan calendar. Fear that the world is about to end is nothing new. It's called eschatology, the belief that there is a preordained date that the world will end. This belief has appeared throughout history. Just before the year 1000, Europeans were so convinced that Christ was going to return for the Great Judgment at the turn of the millennium that farmers didn't even bother to plant crops. Tens of thousands died from the resulting famine. In the late 1340s, when the Black Death decimated over 1/3 of Europe's population, so many people lay dead in the streets that those still living grew convinced they were witnessing the apocalypse. In 1666, a Russian sect known as the Old Believers became convinced that their oppressive czar was the Antichrist who had come to persecute them and bring about the apocalypse. So 20,000 of their members burned themselves to death inside their churches to prevent the apocalypse from happening. And fear of the end of the world continues to this day. In 1974, Time magazine reported the theory by 2 well-respected astronomers that a coming alignment of the planets in 1982 would cause solar storms, severe weather changes, and a massive earthquake that would destroy Los Angeles. The alignment came and went, and no catastrophes occurred. In 1997, 35 members of the Heaven's Gate cult committed suicide when Comet Hale-Bopp appeared. They believed that hidden in its tail was a mothership which had come to collect their souls before the great recycling of Earth that was about to occur.
Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
But this great recycling never occurred. And of course, leading up to the year 2000, over $500 billion was spent worldwide trying to prevent catastrophe from a potential computer failure that never happened. But what makes the end of the Mayan calendar more significant than all the other failed doomsdays in history?
All throughout history, people have been predicting the end of the world, but damn, it looks like it's getting close. You know, there's no money left. There's way too many people.
These are strange times. We are simultaneously facing the looming threats of global warming, peak oil, water shortages, food shortages, resource wars, currency collapse, and global pandemic. pandemic. While we are already in the middle of a worldwide depression, dealing with giant oil leaks, a sudden increase in severe weather, a recent global string of massive earthquakes, the ever-present terrorist threat, and fury over corporations using the government to steal from taxpayers. And the Mayan calendar ending in the middle of all of this creates the feeling that something ominous is looming on the horizon.
People everywhere on the planet feel like something is different, something is changing. And there's just this incredible thirst for knowledge about what is going on. Because they read the newspapers, they listen to the news, and they know that that is not the whole story.
But where did this idea of catastrophe in 2012 come from in the first place? Is this really what the Mayans predicted would happen, or was it something bigger? Let's examine the origins of the 2012 phenomenon to begin our search for the true meaning of the Mayan end date. The end date of the Mayan calendar was not even known to Western science until the 1930s, when a real-life Indiana Jones, the famed archaeologist J. Eric Thompson, brilliantly correlated the Mayan calendar system with our own Gregorian calendar by comparing records of lunar eclipses left by both the Maya and Spanish in the same era. This is known as the GMT correlation. To this day, Thompson's correlation remains the most supported. The first time the end of the Mayan calendar was ascribed cataclysmic meaning was in 1966, when Professor Michael D. Coe speculated in his book The Maya that there is a suggestion that Armageddon would overtake the degenerate peoples of the world and all creation on the final day. Thus, our present universe would be annihilated. This speculation was later contested by other academics, but the idea stuck. It wasn't until 1972 that 2012 entered popular culture, when the esoteric author Terence McKenna, who claimed to have never heard of the Mayan calendar, wrote his book The Invisible Landscape. Inspired by hallucinogenic experiences, McKenna put forth his theory called Time Wave Zero. Using the Chinese fortune-telling book The I Ching and running it through a computer algorithm, he produced a graph that quantified the ebb and flow of mankind's most important turning points throughout history. According to McKenna, the graph indicated that these turning points were increasing in frequency and would continue to increase until December 21st, 2012, when time as we know it would end. This is where the popular idea that 2012 marks the end of time came from, and not the Mayans. The coincidence, however, of two separate sources marking December 21st, 2012 as an end date sparked a fervor of theories by New Age authors, and the 2012 phenomenon was born. In 1975, Native American author Frank Waters tied Hopi prophecies of destruction to the 2012 end date in his book, Mexico Mystique. In the 1987 book, The Mayan Factor, New Age icon Jose Arguelles claimed the Earth was beginning to pass through a spiritual beam of energy the Mayans had been tracking, and had set the end date of their calendar to mark when the Earth will complete passing through this beam, transforming civilization. From there, the 2012 phenomenon spread like wildfire, and other authors began adding 2012 to their own pre-existing theories to give their theories more weight. Even just recently, a claim has been made that a newly discovered lost book authored by Nostradamus contains a doomsday prophecy about the year 2012. Unlike his usual writings, this book is entirely composed of drawings, and just one image in the book, a great wheel in the sky, has been interpreted as evidence that Nostradamus was warning us that a celestial alignment in the year 2012 will destroy the world. Nowhere in this book, however, or any of Nostradamus' other writings, is the year 2012 ever mentioned. But despite such little evidence, theories like these have only fueled the 2012 phenomenon, and more 2012 ideas continue to come forth to the point where everyone has their own take.
2012 is a nexus point in time-space.
In Revelation 12:12, the devil comes down out of heaven.
In regards to 2012, the last several thousand people's charts that I've looked at all seem to have the same energy converging at the same time, which is very unusual. The only time I've ever seen that happen is in the year 2001.
2012 will be a time where we will realize our true place in the universe, because something is going to shake us to our belief systems. It's going to hit what is known as the core belief.
With so many different theories, which one could be right? As December 21st, 2012 draws near, the number of theories keeps increasing, and the variation between them is astounding. They include that recent crop circles indicate a connection with the calendar to planetary alignments in 2012. Time travel will be invented on that date. Our junk DNA will be activated, awakening extraordinary new abilities. A global shift in consciousness will take place. Governments are secretly preparing for an impending cataclysm and keeping the world's population in the dark. The truth about extraterrestrial contact will finally be disclosed. Human beings will become telepathic. The supervolcano beneath Yellowstone will be set off by solar activity as the sun becomes violently active, spewing solar storms that devastate the Earth. The computer-based prophecy program, the WebBot, predicts that millions will die from a combination of pandemics, economic collapse, and unknown energies from space. Secret codes believed long hidden in the Torah are said to warn that a great comet will appear and collide with Earth. A giant asteroid that NASA has kept a secret will collide with Earth. A rogue planet dubbed Planet X will return to our solar system and collide with Earth. The shifting magnetic field will cause a pole flip. The Earth will pass into the fifth dimension, perhaps bringing about the Christian rapture. And that the aliens who created mankind, known as the Nephilim, will return to Earth to harvest humanity, to name a few. At least one thing is sure, they can't all be right. With so many different theories to sort through, I went to get a lead on where to start investigating from the one person who has heard nearly every 2012 theory, George Noory, host of Coast to Coast AM, a late-night radio show that covers paranormal topics and reaches over 5 million listeners per night across North America.
From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. I'm George Noory, and welcome to Coast AM. What a night we've got in store for you tonight as we talk with you about 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar date. What will happen? As we get close to 2012, there are a couple main ideas that people think could happen. One is an Earth-wide catastrophe, something physical, an Earth change, an asteroid, something major could hit the planet. Then there's another camp that believes that we're going to have a moment of enlightenment, that we're going to go through this metamorphosis, this age of Aquarius, that wars will diminish, that crime will go down. I kind of think that may be a little too grand, but they think that that could happen.
What do you really feel is going to happen? Do you have a bad feeling, or do you have an optimistic feeling? Do you think people should be worried?
I think the Mayans were sun worshipers, and when you understand that, then you have to theorize what was 2012 with an organization of people that were worshiping the sun. They were experts in astronomy. So I think all of this leading into 2012 is based on celestial events, not enlightenment, but true science. And I think they knew that the sun had a certain cycle to it, and that this cycle had an effect on planet Earth. My prediction is that around 2012, the planet will undergo a major change because of the sun. Not just a heating up, but perhaps solar flares of unbelievable magnitude. And if we're in alignment with that, communication systems can be knocked out, satellites could be knocked out, a major disruption in the way we live today. I think the Mayans knew that the sun was going to act up in certain periods, and 2012 was one of those periods.
What George said startled me. Could such long-term solar cycles of violent proportion actually exist? With their calendar's end date, could the Mayans have marked when the next violent solar cycle was going to occur? So I headed to the United States' premier solar observatory to find out what scientists know about long-term sun cycles. This is the Kitt Peak National Observatory, 40 miles outside of Tucson, Arizona. It is home to the world's largest solar telescope. Here, scientists monitor the regular cycles our sun goes through.
For hundreds of years that we've been recording it, since Galileo basically has been observing the sun is known to go through a very regular cycle. Every 11 years, the sunspots go up and down with a very regular cycle. Every 11 years, we get to solar maximum. The number of sunspots are ramping up. We should be starting the next cycle right now, and well, by 2012, should be the peak of the next solar cycle. And that's when you have a lot of sunspots, the sun becomes very active, and then that cycle decays away again, and so on and so forth, and it's a very regular cycle. Now, in addition to that, there's a 22-year cycle, and that is the period of time over which the sun's magnetic field reverses.
If these are the 2 solar cycles known to science, but they have only been recording them since the time of Galileo in the 1600s, is it possible that other solar cycles could actually exist that occur over longer spans than this 400-year period we have on record? Some researchers think this is very probable.
If you're looking at an object whose lifespan is about 8 to 10 billion years, depending on the kind of star and where it is in the position of the galaxy, and then try to slice out at like a couple of centuries worth of time, that's like almost impossible. It's just an unbelievably huge statistical variant that it's very difficult to do that. And yet you're trying to look for sort of like macro cycles that may be tens of thousands of years or maybe even hundreds of thousands of years that represent some sort of life cycle type of transition it goes through, and we don't know what those are.
If it is possible that other solar cycles exist, is there any evidence that solar flares powerful enough to harm our civilization have ever occurred?
The largest solar flare that's ever been recorded, and this was done by Carrington, a famous solar physicist in the 1800s, and this was done primarily naked eye. There was an enormous flare in 1859.
That was a solar flare that resulted in a large expulsion of mass from the sun. It came hurling towards Earth and caused one of the largest geomagnetic activities ever recorded on the surface of the Earth by ground magnetometers that measure the distortion of the Earth's magnetic field.
So the telegraph operators in the 1850s actually were able to, in some instances, operate the telegraph wire with strictly the currents produced by this large event in the 1850s.
This surge of current on the telegraph lines was caused by a large explosion of plasma that accompanied the Carrington flare, called the coronal mass ejection, or CME. Our Earth receives a small amount of this plasma each day, and its effects can be seen in the aurora borealis it creates near the poles on a clear night. But in large amounts, this plasma can act like an electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear explosion, causing devastation to electrical grids and components around the world. Some telegraph machines in the 1850s became so hot that the keys turned red and shot sparks that started nearby papers on fire. But the effects of the CME from the Carrington flare were not catastrophic for people living at the time. However, because of our increasing dependence on our modern electrical grids, we are far more vulnerable to such events today. A glancing CME blow from a flare half the size of Carrington in 2003 wiped out 14 power stations in South Africa. And an even smaller one in 1999 collapsed the power grid of Toronto, Canada for 9 hours. These events weren't catastrophic, but a recent report commissioned by the US government concluded that if a CME blast from a Carrington-sized flare were to hit Earth today, it could collapse our entire power grid and take months or even years to restore.
So if this were to happen today, indeed, it would cause extreme increase in radiation levels at the space environment around Earth. You would expect an event of that magnitude to get a significant portion of our space assets destroyed.
According to the government report, the damage from such an event would take the world economy a full decade to recover. The question we face is, how often do Carrington-sized flares occur?
That was an enormous flare, and that one is even larger than anything seen in ice core samples going back 100,000 years. So the Carrington flare happened, at least from what we can see, is once in 100,000 years, something like that.
While it is reassuring to hear that mainstream science estimates a Carrington-sized solar flare happens only once every 100,000 years, many of the 2012 books proclaiming catastrophe cite those same ice core samples as containing evidence of deadly solar bombardment at several periods in the past, which they claim mainstream scientists have overlooked by not searching for the completely different chemical signatures left by such extreme events. If the Mayans had knowledge about solar events of that magnitude, the theory that the end of their calendar marks a giant coming solar storm could then be true. But then wouldn't mainstream science back up that idea? In 2006, Dr. Mausumi Dikpat published the findings from a new computer model she developed to more accurately predict solar flares and CMEs. It compares sea currents on Earth with currents of energy on the sun that produce these solar flares and CMEs. It proved more accurate than current prediction models when tested on historic data. And unlike those conventional models, it does in fact predict that larger solar flare and CME activity than normal will occur in late 2012 to mid-2013. If true, this could support the claims that the Mayans knew of a coming solar storm in our era.
Solar flares normally just play a little bit of havoc with our cell phones, our satellites a little bit. They cook out our sensors and then we recover from it, no problem, even an X-class flare. These flares will be off the scale. The normal proton count we see from a solar flare is about 7.5 protons per cubic centimeter. It's going to be much higher than that, worse than a sunburn.
But could the Mayans have had knowledge about the sun which trumps modern science when they created their calendar over 2,000 years ago?
What is interesting is that in the past handful of years, the sun's temperature and colors have changed. And nobody knows exactly why. But we do know this, that other planets in the solar system are also warming up. The ice caps on Mars are in fact reducing. Saturn is showing some strange patterns in the weather that we didn't see before. Jupiter the same way. Even Uranus has got some strange anomalies in its outer atmosphere that we hadn't seen earlier times.
Venus is something on the order of 2,500 times more luminous than it usually is. Neptune is considerably brighter. In fact, they've modified the way that they process images of Neptune.
Something odd is going on. We don't know what exactly it is, but it does register with the fact that there have been these gigantic flares, this class 40, whatever it was, this X flare that came by, it missed Earth, and that's good for us, but had we not missed, it would have been very bad for us.
So it seems there is a reason why some are concerned that a Carrington-sized solar storm or bigger may be coming soon, because such an event actually could badly damage the infrastructure of our modern civilization. And these new alternative theories suggest such a storm could be coming at the peak of this solar cycle. On top of that, the time frame for the peak of this solar cycle does coincide with the end of the Mayan calendar. But does that coincidence really mean the Mayans were predicting such an event? Is there any evidence that specifically indicates the Mayans set their calendar to end on December 21st, 2012 to prophesize a coming cataclysmic solar storm above all the other possible meanings that date could have?
Considering we're only concerned with this date because the Mayans ended their calendar on it in the first place, we need to go to the place where the calendar was created in order to understand what that end date the Mayans gave us means to us living in that time today.
I traveled down to the Yucatan in southern Mexico, to the lost cities of the Mayan Empire that once ruled over more than 8 million people. The fact is, while much ado is being made about the calendar's end, there remains today little more than fragments of this once colossal civilization. Even where the Maya came from is uncertain. Scholars speculate that they came over a land bridge from the west, on boats from the east, or that they were an offshoot of the prior mysterious Olmec civilization to the south. But their true origin, like much of their history, is shrouded in mystery.
This amazing, this fantastic civilization starts with a mystery and apparently ends at a certain period of time with a mystery. Nobody can exactly establish where they came from, and today it's hard to say where they went to.
It is perhaps this mystery surrounding the Mayans that makes the end date of their calendar so ominous. Appearing as if from nowhere and reaching the highest levels of advancement for any culture in the world at the time, the Mayan Empire comprised a coalition of separate city-states that was one of the longest-lasting civilizations in history, starting as far back as at least 2000 BC and flourishing to 900 AD. They were one of the first cultures to use the semi-arch, which they utilized to build massive pyramids, large urban centers, and aqueducts, which brought fresh drinking water to these large cities and hydrated their crops. They developed energy-dense corn from native teosinte, a feat that has baffled science and must have taken over 1,000 years. This abundant energy source allowed them to specialize their labor, leading to great advances in the sciences of math, timekeeping, and astronomy.
They had a super advanced form of trigonometry, algebra, geometry, music, mathematics.
Their written language was a complicated blend of hieroglyphic and phonetic characters. It has been described by linguists as perfect. They understood the concept of zero 1,000 years before Western culture. and had a numbering system that was base 20, unlike our base 10 system, which allowed them to quickly calculate large numbers with ease, and is how they were able to accurately calculate extremely long astronomical cycles. And the Mayans were the masters of timekeeping and astronomy, with not one but 22 calendars in total. The long count calendar that ends on December 21st, 2012 being only the date counting component of an intricate calendar system that tracked all manner of astronomical cycles. It was so advanced that without fail, it has forecasted every single solar and lunar eclipse in history since it was created.
A calendar is used to register the movement of the heavenly bodies. And the movement of the heavenly bodies is measured in what we know as time.
Beyond merely having advanced astronomy, the Mayans seemingly had knowledge of things beyond their time. Without the use of a compass, their monuments were aligned exactly to true magnetic north.
The question is, how do they knew magnetic north with no compass, with no satellite? Here's where the archaeologists say, well, we don't know, we're still searching, it's many theories.
While Europeans were debating whether the Earth was flat, the Mayans not only knew the Earth was a sphere, but were calculating the rate of the Earth's wobble and tracking the movements of other planets in our solar system.
They knew exactly where we were in the galaxy. They knew the rotational frequencies of the Earth and the galaxy as well.
They even somehow knew the location of the exact center of our galaxy. And remarkably, they called this place in the sky the black hole. Only in the last decade, using the world's most powerful telescopes, have modern astronomers discovered that there is a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy.
Everything that the Mayans knew and everything that the Mayans stated is now beginning to line up with what modern science believes. For example, the Mayans put the creation of the universe at approximately 16 billion years ago. Now, modern scientists believe that the creation of the universe happened about 15.6 billion years ago, and I'm sure they'll get up to about 16 billion or so.
It took data from the Hubble Space Telescope for scientists to calculate the age of the universe. So how could the ancient Mayans have even come close to knowing the date our universe began?
I'm on the scientific field. I try to speak with evidence or analyze things with evidence, but there is a lot of mysteries. How do they know the magnetic north? How do they cut the stone? How do they carry weight? How do they do these things?
What is even more mysterious is that after somehow attaining this eerie level of advancement, somewhere between 800 and 900 AD, an estimated 8 million Mayans suddenly abandoned their city centers and completely disappeared. To this day, science cannot explain why they left or where they went.
The cities were abandoned, period, gone.
This place was left abandoned for 1,000 years. Developing a big society, a big community, and then walking away. Archaeologists believe because they run out of water. Mystics, in the other hand, they believe they reach a high level of conscience and they just walk to another dimension.
Their great cities were left to be swallowed by the jungle until they were finally rediscovered by Western explorers almost a millennia later.
Where did the Maya culture go? Did they get in a spaceship and leave this planet? Did they simply all die because of some calamity or some disease? Did they just disperse themselves through Central America? Nobody really knows. I mean, there are Mayans living today. They're in various cities throughout Central America and all over the place. But in terms of that civilization, they're gone, and nobody really understands where.
The meaning behind the end date of their long count calendar did not survive to be passed down to the many descendants of the Mayans living today. That is why the mystery behind what it means now exists. But this is what we do know about the long count and the Mayan calendar system. To the Maya, science and religion were one and the same. They saw everything in existence as being intricately connected through a web of smaller and greater cycles, because nature is composed of cycles.
They understood that the universe has a beat, that you have a night and you have a day, that you have cycles of life.
The Maya worshipped a pantheon of nature gods, and everything with a cycle was ruled by one of these gods, each having their own traits and energies that influenced the time cycle it carried. Their various calendars measured each of these cycles, and the entire Mayan calendar system centered around a 260-day calendar called the Zolkin.
That happens to be the 260 days for the gestation of the baby. That's the actual scientific time for pregnancy. Their calendar was based on that count, on a life cycle.
The Tzolk'in is further composed of 2 gears based on the Mayan sacred numerals of 13 and 20.
Unlike 60 and 12 and 24, which is what our modern day clocks are based on, the Mayan calendar is based on one wheel of 13 gears, if you will, another wheel of 20 gears, and both of these gears kind of interlocking together.
The 20 gears on one side represent the 20 days in a Mayan month, each with a glyph that has a specific meaning.
They would have 20 glyphs on the Tzolk'in calendar, and those 20 glyphs are actually 20 facades of the creation. Each one of those glyphs has a force, has a meaning that is related to daily life on Earth.
The other gear comprises the 13 sacred numerals of the Mayan counting system. Together, they interlock to form 260 unique days, or one Tzolk'in cycle.
So you don't repeat a glyph and a number exactly the same until 260 days have passed.
The rest of the calendars in the Mayan system revolved around the Tzolk'in, measuring celestial cycles in exact whole number ratios proportional to it.
And that cycle is also related to the solar calendar, to the lunar calendar, which they all regulate to each other like a gear that work together. It's like a clock. You open it up and you see different gears in there with different sizes. That's basically what it is. You have Venus gear, you got the Sun gear, you got the Tzolk'in gear, and they all work together, and they both move the hands on the clock.
But how could these planetary cycles all evenly divide into the Tzolk'in calendar? Some theorize it is because the number 260 is the closest whole number derivative of the equation for pi, which all the cycles of the planets and the Earth conform to.
They lived, built, thought in harmony. Actually, the calendar, the Tzolk'in, the relation between 20 and 13 on the counting is the closest figure to 1.6, which is the golden mean. So even for time counting, they included the Vesica Pisces, the golden mean, into counting time.
13 and 20 is representative of the human body. You have 13 major joints, you have 20 fingers and toes, there are 20 major amino acids specifically in the body. 13 times 20 is 260. You have 260 different types of cells in your body at the same time. So 13 and 20 directly interconnects with everything that has to do with human beings, human evolution, and our life and existence on the Earth.
Now we know that our body is created on sacred geometry, and knowing that, for instance, our finger here multiplied times 1.6 will give you the next one, this one times 0.6 will give you the next, and the rest of the body just comes out of it. That only measurement, 1.618, which is golden mean.
The Mayans used these calendars based on the cycles of nature and the movements of the heavens as their tools to prophesize the qualities of the future. From crop cycles to life cycles to the movements of heavenly bodies, the interweaving energies of the gods ruling these cycles determine the qualities of time itself.
They understood that each day had a combination and had a force that was influencing that day in particular.
To understand and predict the interweaving combinations of these different energies meant for the Maya the ability to adapt to and make best use of their natural world. The various day combinations of these interweaving cycles gave success to specific activities, while some were completely unlucky. Each city was ruled by a priest king, known as a Chalam, who were seen as semi-divine intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their job was to enter shamanic trances and use their advanced system of calendars to interpret and record the upcoming energies from the gods. And because everything was seen as being interconnected, the cycles of the heavenly bodies were seen as directly affecting the energy cycles on Earth. They saw time as the link that wove the energies of these intricate cycles of the Earth and heavens together.
They built their cities the way they did, according to an exact astroscience dictated by those 7 heavenly bodies. It's a reflection from the cosmos passed into a scale into planet Earth, turning them into the link between the eternal life in the cosmos and the finite life on Earth.
These monuments were situated at ideal sites to be used as tools for tracking the movements of heavenly bodies through time.
So we know the sun reaches the summit of the hill, the winter solstice, and then in the roof comes in the equinox. And then we have windows and doors in the palace They are for the other equinox and for the other solstice. The plaza here have the alignment to the magnetic north. So thanks to that, the sun rises and the sun sets on the opposite side. Once a year, they make a beam of light in a size window. So like I say, these are instruments.
Using these sophisticated instruments, the priests track the relationships between heavenly bodies to prophesize the future, and thus gain great power over the people.
It's because the planets rule the people's life. That is the reason the astronomers, probably the priests, become so strong, because they become astrologers. They will tell the people when to plant, when to breed family, when to harvest, when to pay taxes, when to do everything. They will even tell the kings when to go to war, and this got to do with the Venus planetary position.
The Mayans heavily believed in astrology then.
Totally.
All activities for the Maya were centered around the right time cycles, from performing ceremonies in the middle of the night to procreating at the exact right moment. Kings would even kill themselves in order to enter the afterlife on the most glorious day of a cycle.
The Mayas would name the children according to one of those glyphs, and that by having been born on that particular day, those forces in the universe had already dictated what that kid or that girl, that boy are meant to be in their lives. If he was meant to be a soldier or a priest, he would go to the monastery or he would go to warfare academies.
It was so important to the Maya to live their lives in sync with the qualities of time that their culture could be described as time-obsessed.
There's so much timekeeping in Maya inscriptions in the classic period that some people actually believed, until they could read the inscriptions, they believed that the Maya worshipped time itself. But they must have thought that knowing the past and knowing the mathematics of the calendar around the past helped them to guide themselves in the future as an opportunity to manipulate their own destiny.
As such, the art of prophecy was very important to the Maya. And to be able to look ahead and predict the specific date an energy cycle combination would occur on the timeline, the Mayans used the long count calendar, which measured linear time like our Gregorian calendar by counting the days since the mythical beginning of this age that they believed occurred in 3114 BC. That starting date looks like this using our numbers in their long count system, which broke time into separate units like the odometer in a car, creating place values similar to our days, months, and years, but it kept time in units of 20 from the base of the Mayan numbering system. The smallest unit was the day. 20 days made a Mayan month, or winal. 18 winals fit into the Mayan year, called a tune. 20 tunes made a Katun cycle of 7,200 days. 20 Katuns made a Baktun that was exactly 400 Mayan years long. At this point, the place values shifted, as not 20 but 13 Baktuns make one Mayan world age of 5,125 years. This current 13 Baktun cycle ends on December 21st, 2012, and will once again look like this on their numbering system. The question is, what happens at that point? Do more ages happen afterwards, or does it reset and start over again?
The Maya considered their last creation, the one of 3114 BC, to be a time when the Baktun was set at 13 and everything else was set at 0 that's smaller than a Baktun, and everything else above it was set at 13. That's a very special creation date. It's got all this numerological power, 13, 13, 13, 0, 0, 0, 0. Ever since that time, the 13 at the end dropped back to 0. And ever since then, these 4 digits at the end have been adding up. And when this large digit, the Baktun, gets to 13 again, what's going to happen to the higher numbers? Does it click over to 14? Do the higher numbers get changed? I think the Maya believed that that perfect balance of 13s and 0s changed in the year 3114 BC, and when we get to 130000 again in 2012, that the higher numbers won't be the same, and it'll never be that way again.
That is because time will then forever be measured differently in the period thereafter, if the Mayans believed that any more ages were to come next. But what is the meaning behind this change in place values? This shift in time? Some people think that the meaning of the long count is actually encoded within itself, as the shift in place values from 13 to 20 at the Bach tune makes it just so happen that this world age is also composed of 260 Ka tunes. Since 3114 BC is around the time the first city-states formed around the globe, they theorize that this makes the 260 Katuns of this world age like a macro version of the Tzolk'in calendar, itself which is based on the 260 days of human gestation.
This correlation leads some researchers to believe that the beginning of the Mayan calendar in 3114 BC is like the conception point for civilization around the globe. And then 2012, when the calendar ends, it'll finally be the birthing point for civilization.
It's the zygote phase. It's the sperm hitting the egg. And then to December 21st of 2012, I think that's the gestation period, if you will, from conception to birth of what's going to happen next.
But if this is true, then we've just been gestating in the womb since civilization first began 5,000 years ago. So what does a civilization look like then when it's finally born?
These are merely theories in the end, however. The real question is, what did that end date of their calendar mean to them? Because we know it was of great importance to them. The name Maya is actually derived from the calendrical word May, meaning the cycle of 13 Katuns, which refers to the end of the long count calendar cycle in 2012, which means in total, the people of the cycle of 13 Katuns. So to a people that lived their lives by the qualities of time, recording prophecies obsessively about coming time periods, even naming themselves after the grand cycle they were living in, surely the end of this cycle was of great importance to them, and they wrote much about it. So what records are left from the Mayans about this date? What remains from the Mayans about the year 2012? Unfortunately, that is a hard question to answer. This is because after their collapse, the only Mayan centers remaining were small jungle villages of the later post-classic Mayans along the northern Yucatan coast, who lived a much simpler existence and over time stopped using the long count calendar. But they still held the written history and oral tradition of their ancestors, and the meaning of the long count calendar's end date was probably still known up to the time of the Spanish conquest in the 16th century.
By the time the Spaniards arrived, they had already abandoned the cities. They asked in Chichen Itza, what was that? That's the bull court. And what happens with it? We don't know. We just know that 500 years ago, they used to play bull here.
The Spanish were awed by the grandeur of the massive abandoned temples and cities the prior Mayans had constructed. In contrast to the villages they were now living in, the Spanish concluded the Maya were one of the lost tribes of Israel that had descended into barbarism, so they set to rid the Maya of their pagan beliefs and convert them to Christianity. In doing so, the Spanish destroyed nearly the entire written history of the Mayan civilization.
Most of the Mayan books were burned by the Inquisition. They were accused to be Book of the Demons because they have snakes. A snake is the symbol of knowledge. A snake with two heads is knowledge through experience that give you wisdom. But for the Christians in that time, a snake was evil.
Spaniards that befriended the Maya account being shown libraries which held thousands of books, filled with Mayan knowledge and history going back over 900 years. But that knowledge disappeared forever in a burning flash in 1562, upon the bonfires of the conversion-thirsty Spanish bishops.
Judging by what we have left, there must have been some really complete records of calendars and mythological stories and all that were destroyed.
It is only because a few rebellious Spanish priests found the knowledge of the Maya important and worth preserving that we have the 4 remaining Mayan books today.
We only have 4 books left, and they're called the 4 Mayan codexes. And they're actually calendars, but only 4 books out of tens of thousands of written books that were burned specifically by the Catholics when they got here.
The codices are books made from single long pieces of parchment folded up like an accordion. The Gruyere Codex was found most recently of the 4.
The Gruyere Codex was found by grave robbers in the 1960s, which gives us hope that we'll find more books. It's not a very nice book. It's only 11 pages, and it's got some water damage, and half of each page is gone. But it is a real Maya book, and it's the same text as the main part of the other 3 books, which is prognostications based on the calendar.
Prognostications are predictions for upcoming time periods recorded in the codices by Mayan priests. The Gruyere Codex, however, contains no prognostications about the end of the calendar in 2012. The other 3 codices are named after the cities they now reside in today. The Paris Codex and the Madrid Codex contain records of sacred rituals, but neither mentions anything about the 2012 end date either. That leaves just one codex which shines any light on the meaning of 2012, the Dresden Codex, the oldest and most elaborate of the 4. It is the single largest source of long count calendar dates that remain, which were crucial for scholars in correlating the long count calendar to our modern Gregorian calendar. But out of all the long count dates it contains, none are of the date the long count calendar ends on December 21st, 2012. Several independent researchers, however, claim it is encoded with a secret record of violent solar flares, which periodically wipe out life on Earth, and even predicts that the next one will occur at the end of the long count calendar. This complicated theory is rejected by mainstream academics, but where the Dresden Codex does shine light on that end date is on its final page, which contains a picture of how the last world age was destroyed. It depicts a great flood created by a downpour that came from the mouth of the cosmic crocodile in the sky, which engulfed the world and wiped away the last age. This gives us the clue that the Mayans thought prior ages had come before and had been destroyed by great cataclysms. It then raises the question of whether the Mayans believed this age would be destroyed in a cataclysm as well. Luckily, there are some clues to give us an idea. Beyond the 4 books that remain from the conquest, there are 2 books that were written by the Mayans after the conquest.
We have 2 very important post-conquest books, the Popol Vuh and the Chilam Balams. Both of these were written some centuries after the conquest, when they were much, much diminished from having been taxed, having been attacked, having their libraries burned, and having their kings be deposed.
The Chilam Balam, or Books of the Jaguar Prophet, are a series of 9 books of prophecy.
The Chilam Balams are the authorized mouth to speak on behalf of creation. That's basically what the word means. And Balaam was the last name of those last priests.
The Chilam Balam start with what is believed to be an original Mayan prophecy that foretold the coming of foreigners from the sea to the east that would suppress their knowledge until the end of the age. However, these books were written by Mayan scribes using the Latin alphabet at the instruction of Spanish priests, so their contents are believed to have been modified by influence from the Spanish priests to conform with church doctrine.
These books are corrupted by Spanish ideas.
Luckily, the legends contained in the Popol Vuh are depicted on stelas and pottery made at the Mayan city of Azapa at least 600 years before the Spanish arrived, so its myths are considered genuine to some degree.
The Popol Vuh tells a relatively pure version of the pre-conquest myth of the Hera twins and their role in the conquest of the Lords of Death.
This creation myth gives us the best clues about what the Mayans thought about the end of this age we are living in, as well as the history of the prior world ages.
It tells about the creation of the world. The animals didn't satisfy the gods, so they destroyed them. The creation of the world again with people made of mud. The gods weren't satisfied with them, so they destroyed them. The world was created a 3rd time with people made of wood. They still weren't satisfactory. Gods destroyed them again. Then they made us out of maize. They ground up corn and they filled it with, living substance, and they made us perfect. That's 4 worlds. But there is no end of that world in the Popol Vuh, this Mayan myth. But there is a reflection of this myth called the Legend of the Suns in the Aztec mythology, which is much more articulate and much more specific. And the Aztecs, instead of having 4 creations, have 5. And it reflects the Popol Vuh, and it too was written down after the conquest by priests who sat down with Aztec priests and said, tell us the story of the Legend of the Suns.
The question is, how much overlap between the Aztec and Mayan world ages was mixed by the Spanish?
Nobody really knows. Nobody can tell for sure. It's because the Aztecs were ascendant just before the Spanish came, and so there was some idea that the story of the Popol Vuh was reflecting the Aztec creations.
This uncertainty of the overlap in the Mayan and Aztec world ages is what makes people jumpy about the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012. Because though the Mayans did not forecast a cataclysmic end of this age in the Popol Vuh, the Aztecs did believe this age would be destroyed in a cataclysm.
They believed 4 previous ages has come before the 5th one that we live now. The last 4 were previously destroyed. Jaguars, it's the first people, hurricanes 2nd, earthquakes the 3rd one, and rain the last one, like the Bible. So they believe the 5th son will be destroyed by fire.
Some doomsday theorists believe this is specifically fire that will come from the angry sun depicted on the center of the Aztec calendar stone, whom the Aztecs believed was their duty to feed by offering sacrificed human hearts to appease. So despite the differences between the Aztec and Mayan world ages, how possible is it that the end of the Aztec age could also be what the Mayans believed about the end of this age as well? Because in the Chilam Balam, there is one passage that some believe references the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012 that seems to also talk about fire from the sun.
It talks about the behavior of the sun, how the flares are going to affect, and they calculated a groups of times arriving to the point in which in the year 2012, you're going to have big explosions on the sun, bigger than ever seen before. They actually addressed to these explosions as the tales of a guacamaya.
This makes it clear why some of George Norrie's guests have claimed the Mayans ended their calendar on December 21st, 2012, to mark when this age will be destroyed by solar activity.
I've had guests on my program that think that the sun is going to just literally burst its way to planet Earth.
That this prophecy references solar flares is certainly an interpretation.
I don't know if you've seen a guacamaya with the feathers, and that's how they call them. It says when the tails of those birds show, it says that's the time, that's the age. And then we shall prepare for the new era.
If the Chilam Balam was talking about solar eruptions appearing at the end of our age, however, it is very interesting that the Mayans described them as resembling the tails of the guacamaya, because the tails of the guacamaya resemble the colors of the aurora borealis. But the aurora borealis could only be seen in Mexico and Guatemala, where the Mayans lived during a huge solar storm, when a coronal mass ejection directly hits the Earth.
If you have the Carrington flare, or even one that was maybe even a little bit bigger, a couple times bigger, what you would probably see is more or less global aurora. Northern lights pretty much everywhere, probably be quite spectacular.
This is exactly what happened during the Carrington flare of the 1850s, and the aurora borealis it created was visible as far south as Mexico and Guatemala. Could the Mayans or their ancestors have witnessed a similar event? To describe something new, ancient scribes would have referred to something within their frame of reference. Could the sighting of the tails of the guacamaya in the southern skies again be the sign that our age is ending as well? The fact that Dr. Mausumi Dikpat's new solar storm prediction model possibly supports this theory is very disconcerting. However, for the Mayans to have been able to accurately predict that a giant solar storm would occur in 2012, over 2,000 years ago when they created their calendar, would simply trump the solar forecasting abilities of modern science. The knowledge of the Mayans was remarkably advanced for their time, but could it have been that advanced?
I would suggest the following. They may not have known because of their own reasoning, but they may have been told to be aware of it.
But told by whom? If the Mayans did possess knowledge about the sun and universe that far surpasses modern science, where did it come from?
The really big question is, where did the Mayans get their information from? Did they download it from the galaxy? Did they receive it from some prior ancient civilization, even more advanced than us, perhaps?
According to a legend in the Chilam Balam, the Mayans received their knowledge from a white-skinned visitor named Kukulkan that came to their land on a self-powered boat. He taught them the way of peace and gave them their knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and architecture. Kukulkan then left on his boat and prophesied he would one day return and unite the world with his knowledge. The post-classic Mayans are said to have mistook the arrival of the Spanish to be the return of Kukulkan, and Hernan Cortez took advantage of this to exploit them and destroy their culture. Could the legend of Kukulkan mean that the Mayans received their knowledge from a more advanced prior civilization? Perhaps one that was destroyed by the flood they believed wiped away the last age, just like the fabled Atlantis.
The pieces of evidence that indicates to me that there was this prior advanced civilization is, one, the Great Pyramids in Giza. I mean, what a magnificent achievement. We can't even duplicate it today. The other thing is that when you look at the temples, especially in Egypt, and you see what I would say is a pre-flood temple, and even perhaps an Atlantean temple, is the Osirion in ancient Egypt. It's behind the Temple of Abydos. It's composed of colossal red granite blocks that we can't even move today. And it's there that you really get the sense that there was this magnificent civilization that had perhaps the ability to levitate those stones, to move them around like we move Lego blocks.
what is most astounding is that there are examples of this all around the world, like the site of Baalbek in Lebanon.
Baalbek is a very important historical location because there's a temple there, an ancient Roman temple, which is built on top of an even more ancient temple with these massive stones. They're called trilithons that weigh on the order of 1,400 tons. And they couldn't even be moved or quarried by modern technology, yet they are there, stacked up one after the other, very precisely aligned.
You see the same construction at the Valley Temple beside the Sphinx and in South America, and it appears that this was in fact a global civilization.
Whatever happened at the end of the last age would have to have been vastly destructive if the monuments of this civilization are all that now remain. However, there is an explanation for these baffling construction feats around the world, which some say would better explain the nature of the highly advanced knowledge of the Mayans.
I think the Mayans got their information from an advanced civilization not on this planet. They were just too advanced. They didn't have the modern technology that we know of. How did they know about astronomy? How did they know about things in this solar system? How did they know about things in this galaxy?
The open question is, how did the Mayans know all this stuff? How did the Egyptians have all this astronomical knowledge that they had?
The ancient Egyptians clearly state that they get their knowledge from beings who came from the stars. And there are Mayan researchers that make the claim that the Mayans themselves came from the stars and had this incredible stellar knowledge. So I think it's quite possible that the ultimate source of this knowledge about the Milky Way and these cycles came from star beings that are described as light beings in ancient texts, and in fact appear in every single spiritual tradition as bearers of advanced spiritual knowledge.
All the ancient cultures say that beings from the sky came down and gave them this information. They don't tell how they used reason and logic to figure it all out like we like to do in our modern culture. They simply say somebody came down and gave it to us. So in my mind, I think we have to take that literally and just accept them at their word that they got it from somebody else.
But is there evidence the Mayans had contact with ancient extraterrestrial visitors? The Mayans also mythologize Kukulkan as a god, and the Chalam Balam also refers to him as the feathered serpent god of wisdom that flew in the sky on a magic rug or blanket. This is taken by some to mean that Kukulkan was in fact not of this earth, but of otherworldly origin.
To me, it's probably one of the only good explanations as to how the Mayan culture could come up with answers that modern science took years to discover.
Similar to the legend of Kukulkan, the Mayan ruler of Palenque, known as Pakal, was also said to have been a god. He was 8 feet tall and lived to the age of 80, which was unheard of for Mayans at the time. It is claimed in the book Chariots of the Gods that the carved lid of Pakal's tomb depicts him traveling in a spaceship. But if the Mayans had contact with visitors from an extraterrestrial civilization, where did they go?
Going back, maybe 100,000 years, maybe more. But something happened that went from us being very primitive and essentially non-human to suddenly building things and becoming very much more organized. It kind of suggests that maybe something happened at that point. The thought would be that perhaps there was a major update and then sort of adjustments along the way.
But is this the whole story of how the Mayans attained their vast knowledge of our universe, and more importantly, how they saw our universe? Because records and murals inside the Temple of Inscriptions, built in honor of Pakal, claim that he was a master shaman. According to these records and murals, Mayan shamans could access higher levels of consciousness by performing a specific series of rituals. They would first enter a fasted state for days. Then they would perform a series of yogic-like postures to activate energy centers of the body. Afterwards, they would sit in a heated steam room and chant continuously.
And the little drumming is also like a self-hypnosis.
Finally, they would consume large doses of powerful hallucinogens, which were plentiful in the Yucatan, and induce themselves into a deep trance. This would transition the shamans to the other realm, while their scribes recorded what they were witnessing. In this state, could they have seen the very architecture of the universe? Could they have seen things even more accurately than our modern telescopes can detect? Because Mayan priests account that Pakal could access all the knowledge of the cosmos and could transcend time and space. and holes were built into the floor of the pyramid above his tomb so that Pakal could continue to communicate to his priests and give prophecies to them from the afterlife. And today, there are many who claim to have received visions while meditating in his tomb. Some, like author Jose Argüelles, even claim to have received prophecies from Pakal about the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012. This all seemed silly to me until...
Oh, we can't go up there, huh?
No, that's the only one that is not allowed to go up
Now,
there.
why can't you go up there?
And so I became curious. After learning that no prophecies about the end of this age exist in the remaining Mayan texts, I was tired of hearing theories about what their prophecies might have been. So I decided to see for myself if Pakal's temple would give me such visions.
We've arranged a ride to take us into Palenque. We're going to pay off the guards and we're going to sneak into the tomb of Pakal. I'm going to meditate and hopefully have some kind of spiritual experience.
We made our way through 3 miles of jungle in total darkness as a tropical hurricane set in.
Okay, good. Okay, we're gonna go into that tomb. We just paid the guard out so we could do it. Let's go.
I descended into the tomb, which was much deeper and darker than I ever imagined. My mind raced, thinking of the sacrifices that had occurred in this temple and about what terrible visions I might have about 2012. Finally, I found the tomb of Pakal. The lid alone weighs 8 tons. Is this the spirit of a Mayan god ascending the world tree after death? Or a traveler from another planet returning to outer space? I decided to turn the lights out and fulfill my mission as promised, and I meditated in the tomb alone.
So you're in there. Tell me about it.
I don't know. I did feel some sort of shift in me. I felt different. It felt like my being. I know this sounds weird. It felt like it went from this to this. Like, I don't know what that means, but that's how it felt.
What do you think all this has to do with learning about 2012?
I think that's telling me something about 2012, that the Mayans were much more in tune with a sort of, I guess, higher resonance or higher kind of plane of knowledge about all this kind of subtle energy stuff, and they knew how to build structures to sort of funnel that energy and project that energy, because when I was in there I definitely felt an energetic shift, as they call it, for the first time in my life.
I left Palenque with more questions than answers. While I had felt something inside the tomb, I'd had no visions of how this age will end or anything like the 2012 prophecies Argüelles claimed to have received inside the tomb. Being that I hadn't taken hallucinogens like him, though, and the Mayan shamans of the past, it was just enough to leave his claims as a possibility, but not enough to confirm them. Knowing now that no prophecy for the Mayan end date of December 21st, 2012 survives in the remaining Mayan codices, I wanted to know, did anything remain from the Mayans that mentions the end date of the Mayan long count calendar? It turns out that there is something, just one thing, that mentions the 2012 end date at all.
Of all the Maya texts we have, and we have thousands, tens of thousands of Maya inscriptions on pottery and on stones and a few books, there's only one that mentions the year 2012. The monument, which is called Tortuguero 6, which mentions the date 2012, is one of the class of monuments that talks about a future date, usually as a kind of a looking forward to an anniversary of something that happened in the life of the king that they're writing about.
The translation of the prophecy is this. The 13th Baktun will be finished on 4 Ahau, the 3rd of Khan Kin. After that, as all mysteries go, the glyphs detailing what is actually prophesized to happen on that date are missing from the stela. After this missing piece, the inscription continues about this unknown event, saying that it will occur. It will be the descent of the 9 support gods, and then the rest of the inscription is missing. At the very least, the Tortuguero prophecy tells us the Maya did believe something significant would happen at the end of the 13th Baktun cycle. But what? Mark Van Stone is one of the leading Mayan epigraphers in the world, and he has another translation of what this stela might say.
And the Tortuguero monument jumps ahead from the year 669 to the year 2012, and it says that on that date, a god named Bolonyokte will dress. And he'll put on a costume as a great impersonator, which means he's channeling a god from above. And it's interesting that a god will channel another god. But that's all it says. It doesn't say it's a good or a bad date. It's not at all unequivocal that they thought good or bad things would happen.
With the inscription not being conclusive, I wondered if it could not still be used to help find the meaning of the calendar end date. Was the event it was referencing literal, or was it meant figuratively? Knowing now that Mayan gods represented energy time cycles they carried, the first translation of the inscription, saying it will be the descent of the 9 support gods, sounded a lot to me like the simultaneous ending point of various calendar energy cycles when the long count calendar ends. And being that the most important energy cycles to the Maya were the cycles of heavenly bodies, it was starting to seem like the true meaning of the long count calendar end date was likely connected to the strong belief the Mayans had in astrology. It was time to see if I was right and go to the heart of the Mayan calendar mystery itself. So I headed to Azapa, the place where the long count calendar is believed to have first emerged, to talk with John Major Jenkins, the world's leading expert on the 2012 end date. His best-selling book, The Galactic Alignment, proposes a solid theory that the meaning behind the end of the Mayan long count calendar was based on a grand astronomical cycle. And this sounded like the right direction to me.
Any discussion of 2012 should include not only Azapa, but the ball court at Azapa. This is like ground zero of the 2012 cosmology, of the 2012 prophecy. This is the place where the 2012 calendar was invented, the mythology that goes along with it, that describes the spiritual teachings. See, that's the thing, we have the whole package right here at Azapa, a prophecy for 2012, as well as the astronomical science that lies behind it. All of these monuments and all of the alignments can be reconstructed, and they tell us that the Maya were aware that in the years around 2012, the December solstice sun would be lining up, would be converging with and lining up with the Milky Way that arches over the horizon there.
This slow convergence of the Milky Way band with the unchanging rise point of the sun each winter solstice is caused by a phenomenon known as precession, the slow shifting of the Earth's axis as it spins, that causes our view of the stars in our galaxy to shift slowly backwards over time. It takes close to 26,000 years for the Earth to complete just one cycle of precession.
Every solstice, the Azapan cosmologists and astronomers would look at the dawning December solstice sun. Right before dawn, they would see the Milky Way coming up over the horizon. Now, 2,000 years ago, there was about a 30-degree spread between the arching white band of the Milky Way and the sunrise. But precession has been causing these two things to converge very slowly. So there was a tracking process that happened. Over hundreds of years, they were tracking this convergence, realizing that at some future date, the two would converge. And that's what they were attempting to do with their long count calendar. With their end date in 2012, they had targeted the time when these two things would converge. This is referred to as the galactic alignment. The galactic alignment is the alignment of the December solstice sun with the nuclear bulge of the galactic center. It's an alignment within the cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. It happens only once every 26,000 years. For this reason, it's pretty clear that we can understand it by way of analogy as being sort of midnight. It's the midnight point in the great cycle of time. So it's like galactic midnight. It's the turnabout point in the great cycle of precession. The galactic alignment involves certain astronomical features, including the Milky Way and the dark rift in the Milky Way, which is this sort of dark ridge caused by interstellar dust. The Maya mythologized this astronomical feature as the Xibalba Bay, the road to the other world. And it's a key player in their Maya creation mythology. So one thing I realized early on is that all of the key features of this astronomical alignment are front and center in the Maya creation mythology. Now we know from studying Maya symbolism that the Milky Way represented the cosmic ball court, and thus the dark rift in the Milky Way is the goal ring in the ball court. The December solstice sun is the game ball. So the process of kicking the game ball into the goal ring is the process of the galactic alignment, the December solstice sun moving into alignment with the dark rift. What is so critical about the ball court here is that it integrates this incredible cosmological paradigm involving Takana volcano to the north. If we were here at night, we would see the Big Dipper rising over the eastern flank of the volcano, spinning over the pole star and setting in the west. The Big Dipper constellation is Seven Macaw in the Popol Vuh. Astronomy and mythology go together in Maya thinking. Seven Macaw represents out-of-control narcissistic egoism. He's the vain and false ruler that appears at the end of the cycle in the myth. And he's basically preventing one Hunahpu from being reborn. One Hunahpu is the December solstice sun that lines up with the galactic center and gets reborn at the end of the cycle in 2012.
All around Izapa, imagery from the Popol Vuh is carved on stelas depicting this story of one Hunahpu and his sons, the hero twins.
The details of the Maya creation mythology get into describing what the Maya believed would be happening at the end of the current 13 Baktun cycle as we approach 2012.
The first humans of this age were one Hunahpu and seven Hunahpu, twin brothers of divine descent, who loved playing the sacred ball game all day long. The ruckus they made infuriated the lords of the underworld and their vain ruler, Seven Macaw. So the lords invited the divine twins to the underworld, called Xibalba, to play a ball game they had rigged. The innocent twins lost, and the ruthless lords beheaded them and hung one Hunahpu's head on a calabash tree at the entrance to Xibalba as a warning to other misfits. The virgin daughter of an underworld lord snuck to see one Hunahpu's mesmerizing head, which spat in her hand, impregnating her. This forced her to flee Xibalba when her angry father found out. She gave birth to Xbalanque and Hunahpu, the hero twins, who had her underworld cunning as well as their father's divine wisdom. And they too also loved playing ball all day long. Again, the underworld lords grew furious and invited the new twins to another rigged ball game. But these twins were clever. Seeing the game was impossible to win, they dove into the river and became fish to escape the underworld. When free, they devised a plan of revenge and disguised themselves as traveling magicians, gaining great renown. As magicians, they were soon requested to come to Xibalba to perform their best tricks. Amazing the lords with their grand finale, Xbalanque violently beheaded Hunahpu and then magically brought him back to life. The lords ecstatically begged to go through the trick themselves to prove their daring to each other. The hero twins gladly obliged and beheaded all of the underworld lords, but did not bring them back to life. Furious upon finding his lords beheaded, Seven Macaw attacked the boys, but they were too clever to face his might, and Xbalanque distracted him with a fire torch, while Hunahpu tore out his diamond eyes, forever ending his age of oppression and rule by force. Finally, the hero twins were able to return to the ball court, where they resurrected their father and uncle. Their uncle became the moon, and their father became the sun, and sat on the cosmic crossroads to begin a new age where humans could see their connection with all things through their divine source within. The humans of the upper world rejoiced, as the world was now in harmony, and all of humanity together were of one mind. Or what John interprets as being called unity consciousness.
Well, here we have a picture of the father of the hero twins, one Hunahpu. He's the figure that's emerging from the mouth of this frog. Now notice that his arms are outstretched. That's a period-ending measurement. So he's measuring the end of a cycle. It's portraying the rebirth of the unity consciousness at the end of the cycle, so that we can reconnect ourselves with the divine mind. That's what our culture is missing. That's what our civilization is missing. The father of the hero twins represents the December solstice sun, and the mouth of the frog is the dark rift in the Milky Way. The Maya thought of this as the womb of the Great Mother. It's like a creation place.
And the sun passing through it metaphorically looks like a symbol of rebirth. And to the Mayans, it was mythologized as just that.
For them, that became an overarching symbol of the future rebirth of the world.
But was this knowledge isolated to just the Mayans, or did other cultures speak of a time when a cosmic conjunction would completely transform mankind?
The idea of a future galactic alignment is a very deep knowledge in the Western tradition. It's just that it's come down to us today sort of fragmented. Fragmented as a kind of like underground stream of esoteric information that, echoes of which pop up at various times in history, and astrological ideas or tarot symbolism or Christian architecture that we see in Europe.
The ancient Maya recognized this alignment with the center of our Milky Way galaxy as the cosmic cross.
It's the cross formed by the Milky Way itself and the ecliptic.
Symbolism of this galactic cross shows up in many ancient cultures around the world, from Babylonian to Nordic to Roman, Hindu, Peruvian, and Chinese. It appears extensively in Egyptian inscriptions and in Gothic architecture in the cathedrals of Europe, built by secret Masonic orders whose heritage comes from Egypt.
And this cosmic cross is believed to be the embodiment of what they refer to as the sacred tree. This is basic symbolism we're dealing with here. We're talking about an alignment of stars and planets with the center of the galaxy, but they refer to it as a tree. And a tree is something that you can ascend, you can climb, and that is very helpful to understanding 2012. And what we see in this image is two Mayan priests standing on either side of that sacred tree. It looks like they're receiving energy from that tree or beaming energy to it. This tree shows up in all the world's sacred traditions. For example, when you go to ancient Egypt, the Temple of Seti at Abydos, we see the exact same image. Two priests on either side of a sacred tree with the bird on top, just like the Mayans show it. And this time they add the key bird, the heron, which the Egyptians was a symbol of rebirth, renewal, and resurrection. What is so incredible about this is that the Mayas said that the center of the Milky Way is the place of herons. The Mayan priests and the Egyptian priests are telling the exact same story. They're describing a moment in time, an alignment, and a moment of ascension as that alignment occurs. And humanity on Earth is connected with the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Another name for this tree in ancient Egypt was called the Jed, a ladder, a tree that connected heaven and earth. This is the tree of life. This is the tree of knowledge of the book of Genesis, I believe. And what we're preparing to do is to experience a new moment of Genesis. John Major Jenkins calls it cosmogenesis. It's as if this is a moment of rebirth, and this symbolism is coming back at this time so that we can appreciate this moment. And so I believe it's important that we expand our vision beyond the Maya vision of the sacred tree to understand this moment by looking at other traditions.
It does seem like it's a core idea that some of the oldest civilizations were aware of.
Not all ancient views of this alignment were positive, however. The most famous example being the alchemical cross of Hendaye in southern France. The inscription on this non-Christian cross refers to the last day of time when the great cross in the sky is formed. Whether the Mayans ended their long count calendar in 2012 because of the galactic alignment, the Mayans definitely seemed aware of the fact that this galactic alignment was coming. John thinks they were predicting that the alignment would bring a time of spiritual rebirth. But is there a way the alignment could somehow cause physical harm to our planet or solar system that would spell the end of mankind? Are there any other ancient cultures that were aware of this coming alignment that predicted ominous events would come with it? And if there are, did they say how they would be brought about? This is Giant Rock in the Joshua Tree Desert of California. The local Indians referred to it as the Earth's Heart, and according to their legend, it was said that when the Earth's heart split in two, the end of the world was near. In 1999, the Indian legend came true, and Giant Rock split in half. But what kind of forces could cause solid rock to crack, and how could they have been accurately predicted to have these effects in ancient times? Could the mechanism behind this that the Indians understood be the same one that the Mayans understood when the galactic center lines up with our sun, and that indeed, as the Indians prophesied, the end of the world is near?
As it turns out, there are a dozen different major traditions, from the Sefer Yetzirah to the Mayan Popol Vuh to the Egyptian Book of the Dead to the Bible to the Book of Mormon. All these things have relevant perspectives. It tells the story that something significant is going to happen on 2012. It could be cataclysmic and it could be a grand awakening, but something is going to happen.
Is there a way, somehow, that the galactic alignment itself could have been known to cause physical peril to our planet? Because inside of our galactic center resides a supermassive black hole that science has only recently discovered. Astonishingly, the Mayans actually referred to the galactic center as the resting place of the black hole, which they believed was the source of life for all the cosmos.
Mayan epigraphers have translated a glyph that's involved in creation to mean the black hole. So creation happens at the black hole.
We're lining up with the supermassive black hole in the center of the galaxy. When supermassive spinning black holes spin, they don't stay spherical. They flatten out like a giant plate. And that plate, that line of gravity is very intense. The gravitational waves bend space-time as far out as way beyond the edge of the galaxy. That's what lights up all the stars in the galaxy. That's why galaxies are disc-shaped, because that's the band of gravity that is put off by the black hole.
Traditional physics shows no way that aligning with such massive and powerful bodies as a black hole could threaten our planet. But a new theory called hyperdimensional physics proposes that torsion fields are created by the rotating of heavenly bodies, and that intersecting paths of these torsion fields can have disastrous effects.
Hyperdimensional physics says as you come to these nexus points, these alignments of planets and stars and galactic centers and so forth, that you will have measurable physical effects. Now, one of the things that could happen with this galactic alignment, where the center of the galaxy and the sun and the Earth all line up, is that you could have waves of interference. You could have ripples in the ether in this higher force space that could cause physical effects in our three-dimensional universe.
At that moment, our sun will be on the opposite side of the Earth. So when there's a flare, the flares will actually be going toward the center of the galaxy, and Earth will be in the path. So the normal prominences that issue out from the sun, they'll be drawn because of that extra gravitational wind much further than they ever have before, and it will wreak havoc with satellites and electronic equipment.
And now finally, we have the science behind how it has been proposed that the end of the Mayan calendar marked the time of a violent solar event, because of the association from John that the end of the Mayan calendar reflected the galactic alignment. But the Mayans seem to have seen this alignment in a positive light, and even if other cultures saw it bringing destruction, did any other culture give a date to when it would occur? Did any other culture besides the culture at Izapa and then the Mayans after them put a date on it?
It does not seem to be, no. It seems to be that only the Maya had, created an entire calendar that points to a specific date that indicates this galactic alignment.
But still, is it possible that the galactic alignment could cause a buildup of energy in our sun that could lead to violent solar storms? Perhaps, but it is very important to consider that this galactic alignment occurs slowly over a 30-year span of time, and modern astronomers recently calculated that the centermost point of the alignment actually already occurred in 1998.
You know, the alignment is not exactly perfect. The perfect alignment where the sun and the Earth and the galactic center were all lined up just basically perfectly was in 1998, and that is the hottest year on record, just as a little bit of reference information. So we've kind of been cooler ever since then. But if we ramp back up again towards 2012, then I think we probably have some reason to be concerned.
Earth's temperature has dropped since 1998, the hottest year on record, which would seem to negate the theory that the sun is getting warmer as we approach the galactic alignment on December 21st, 2012. This doesn't mean that the sun won't have a large solar flare during the peak of this cycle, but it does seem as if the alignment will not cause such a solar flare. It would also go in line with the view of mainstream solar physicists who predict this solar cycle will fortunately be a mild cycle. Hopefully this will give us the time we need to guard against our extreme vulnerability to such events. If the galactic alignment was so important to the Mayans, but they did not associate it with physical changes on Earth, then maybe the alignment does only bring with it the spiritual changes in consciousness that John Major Jenkins theorizes the Mayans were foretelling. But is it possible that some influence from the galactic alignment, like gravitational waves or magnetic fields, could cause such a transformation in human beings? Recent studies show that greatly amplifying the magnetic field of Earth can boost IQ and creativity. But beyond that, such effects are a widely unexplored area of science. Though anecdotally, astrology has been practiced for thousands of years by all civilizations of the past.
The people that formulated this incredibly advanced galactic paradigm, they were sky watchers and calendar priests, And they were also shaman. It's quite apparent that there was a kind of progressive visionary shamanism that was going on at the site of Izapa. Shamans avail themselves of tools of vision, sacred plants, and the environment. And I believe that the Izapan shamans were able to open up their consciousness to understand these subtle things about the cycles in the heavens and how they relate to human beings on Earth.
John's assertion reflected the conclusion I had come to based on my experience in the tomb, that the art of shamanic journeying using hallucinogens was at the center of their worldview and their advanced understanding of our cosmos as well as our place in it. It made me think that if John's conclusion was correct that the Mayans foresaw a birth or rebirth to a new form of consciousness at the end of the Mayan calendar, that there must be some piece of evidence embedded within the Tortuguero prophecy that supports a conclusion like that also. I returned to the States to find out, and quickly found that this is exactly the case. Doctor of Biology Carl Johann Kalaman has come up with an intricate theory described in his book, The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness, that the Tortuguero Monument and the purpose of the long count calendar itself was to function as a tracking mechanism for the evolution of consciousness through history.
The inscription in Tortuguero, it says that the 9-step God will descend. In other words, the 9 forces, the 9 waves, they will simultaneously descend or manifest.
Kalaman's research indicates that the Mayan calendar is not keyed to the movement of planetary bodies. Instead, he says it functions as a metaphysical map that describes the turning points of evolution of the cosmos, human history, and human consciousness.
Put simply, Kalaman asserts that studying the Mayan calendar dates left on stelas and comparing them to the biological record shows that major turning points in the Mayan calendar correspond with major turning points in evolution.
Absolutely. When there are shift points in the Mayan calendar, we see the world changing.
Barbara Hanclough, renowned author and former head publisher of Bear & Company Books, which has produced many of the books on the 2012 phenomenon, wholeheartedly endorses Kalaman's theory as the most accurate account of the meaning of the 2012 date from all the materials she has published, with its central idea of time acceleration.
The idea of time acceleration is that evolution is accelerating and going faster and faster and reaching an apex, and then the Mayan calendar seems to reflect that process. The main dates that Kalaman and I are working with are on a stele, which is a carved stone column at Koba. The Koba stele is the stele that has all of the dates for the Mayan cycles since 16.4 billion years ago, which is basically the Big Bang. If we take the information on that Koba stele and then change it to the evolutionary cycles, we come up with a whole evolutionary sequence which is exactly the same as the evolutionary sequence according to science.
The calendar dates on the stela are divided into 9 levels, corresponding to the 9 levels of the underworld from the Popol Vuh. Each underworld is divided into 6 days and 7 nights, or 13 shifts. These shifts occur 20 times faster in each ascending underworld. This relationship between 13 and 20 means that each level is accelerating in the same proportion as the golden ratio.
The only thing that depicts that form of time is the golden mean, which is a spiral which is operating according to numerical codes and is gradually winding into a greater and greater intensity. It starts out very wide at the bottom. It's the exact perfect model for the 9 underworlds.
Because of this, Kalaman has likened these underworlds to sinusoidal waves and has created a model of this which equates to the evolutionary waves of time.
The basic structure is like 9 waves, each with a separate frequency. The longest wave is 16 billion years. So that's the beginning of the universe, where change is very slow but very deep and profound. On top of this are 8 other waves, each of which is 20 times shorter than the one that it's based on. That's the basic structure, and each of those is a wave. Whenever there is a shift between a valley and a peak, if you like, there will be occurring significant things in the universe, in the creation of the universe.
What happens at each one of those is a critical shift in human evolution, or I should say species evolution.
They were living in an era where they were more in tune and sensitive to the energies of time. not in the sense of mechanical time, but in the sense of the qualities of time that are altering. And so they were able to see this pyramid, if you like, of evolution. And this is what I believe they built their pyramids to symbolize. They reflected the 9 waves built on top of each other.
So in other words, the Mayans were showing through their construction of pyramids the essence of the underworlds. The Great Pyramid at Tikal is a graphic illustration of the 9 underworlds.
As you go up each level of the pyramid, it goes progressively faster. And then finally, the very top of the pyramid, humanity launches into the next phase of its evolution.
The turning point of each underworld on the Mayan calendar has corresponded with surprising accuracy to major advances in the development of the human race. The regional underworld coincides with the advent of spoken language.
In any anthropology book you read, it's going to say, suddenly, we started being more like humans as we are today 100,000 years ago.
The national level coincides with the appearance of the first city-states around the world.
This is the evolution of cities and temple city culture. All over the planet, China, Maya, Egypt, Sumeria, suddenly all these temple city cultures just popped up. All of a sudden it was armies and materials and roads, and it was a profound change.
The planetary underworld coincides with the start of industrialism in the mid-1700s.
And suddenly all over the planet, industry developed. People were pulled out of their villages and pulled out of their fairly simple country life, and they went into the factories.
Even the turning points in modern times match up. The sudden explosion of the World Wide Web in the 1990s corresponds with the start of the galactic underworld.
In 1999, we got hooked into the global computer. And, you know, for everybody, this was a positive or a negative thing, whatever it was for you, but I'll tell you, there was no getting around it.
Shifts are now happening on an increasing rate in the reality we're living in. Is that we are experiencing a speed up of time. Really what it is that the frequency of change in the Mayan calendar energies is now increasing. Because each of these levels, they carry a certain frame of consciousness. Each frame of consciousness is some kind of a filter to our mind. And then we, the human beings, we perceive reality through that filter. Then we tend to create our world in accordance to that filter we're seeing the world in. What the 9th wave is expected to bring is a shift to unity consciousness.
You know, in other words, we are in the middle of an evolutionary critical leap. We have reached the point where the biggest and most intense part of the shift is happening right now.
This idea of accelerating evolution is not new. It's also being studied in a parallel field of science. Computer scientists around the world are proposing that the accelerating rate of technological progress occurring at this very moment is the new forefront of the evolutionary process.
You look at it as the age of convergence because you have the converging of all these different things that have never happened before in the history of which we're currently aware.
They are called futurists. They predict where this technological acceleration will lead in the near future. And key among them is Ray Kurzweil, renowned author and inventor of the optical scanner, character recognition software, text-to-speech software, and the first orchestral level electric piano, which he designed for his friend Stevie Wonder. Kurzweil has analyzed and charted the accelerating rate of technological progress taking place as the next step in the ascending levels of intelligence that have evolved on Earth. These thresholds, which he calls epochs, closely mirror the shifts in evolution that Kalaman says correspond to the Mayan underworlds. And like Kalaman, Kurzweil's model also shows that the rate of evolution is speeding up.
Evolution is not just biological. I mean, it started with biological evolution, and even biological evolution got faster and faster. I mean, it took 1 billion years for DNA to evolve, but then only took a few 100,000 years for Homo sapiens to evolve. And lately, the cutting edge of evolution has not been biological, but technological. And that actually was a smooth progression, because it then took tens of thousands of years for the first generation of tools to be created. And now a new generation of tools takes place in 6 or 12 months. Critical to my thesis is something called the law of accelerating returns, which states that information technology is growing exponentially and very predictably. Any technology where you can measure the information content grows in a similar way. Genetic sequencing has doubled every year, and the amount of data we're getting in brain scanning, the size of the internet, in nodes, telecommunication speeds and capacities, all of these things follow these exquisitely smooth, predictable exponential progressions. In fact, if you look at computation through the entire 20th century, it forms a very smooth exponential curve going back to the 1890 census. It went through 5 different paradigms, starting with electromechanical calculators, relay-based computers, vacuum tubes, discrete transistors, and then finally integrated circuits. And every time one paradigm ran out of steam, another one came out of the wings to take over. So people say exponential growth can't go on forever. That's true, specific paradigms run out of steam, but then another one takes over. And the reason for that is evolution always uses its latest products, whether it's DNA and biological evolution or the internet and technological evolution, to create the next generation. So it feeds on itself, and it gets faster and faster, and it gets more and more powerful.
Kurzweil points out that because of the exponential rate at which technology progresses, people don't realize how quickly these changes are going to come and how profoundly they're going to affect our lives.
People intuitively think in a linear fashion. They think things will continue at the current speed. And even sophisticated scientists, they look, over the past year, we've solved sort of 1% of the problem, this will take a century, without realizing and factoring in correctly how explosive the exponential nature of progress is. When I was a student at MIT, all of MIT shared one computer. In fact, I went to MIT because it had a computer. Most colleges didn't have them. Well, the computer in your cell phone today is 1,000,000 times smaller and 1,000,000 times cheaper, but it's actually 1,000 times more powerful. That's a billion-fold increase that we've actually already experienced in the price performance of computers in the last 40 years. In the next 25 years, we'll shrink it again by a factor of 100,000, multiply the price performance and capacity a billion-fold. So computers that are now small enough to fit in your pocket will actually be small enough to fit inside a blood cell. And we'll have blood cell-sized devices going inside our bloodstream, keeping us healthy from inside, providing radical extensions in human longevity, as well as going inside our brains through the capillaries non-invasively, interacting with our biological neurons, and basically making us smarter. Now, technology already makes us smarter. The fact that I can take something out of my pocket and with a few keystrokes access all of human knowledge, that's an extension of human intelligence, even if it's not inside my brain yet. So once machines can reach the subtlety and suppleness and diversity of human intelligence, it'll combine it with these ways in which machines are already more powerful. I mean, your $1,000 laptop can remember billions of things accurately. We're hard-pressed to remember a handful of phone numbers. Machines, once they learn a skill, can share it with other machines at electronic speeds. That's 1,000,000 times faster than human language. So when we combine these advantages of machines with our skills in pattern recognition, and that is the heart of human intelligence, it will be a very powerful combination. And then machine intelligence will continue to benefit from this law of accelerating returns, a doubling in less than a year of its powers. And doubling every year is multiplying by 1,000 in 10 years, 1 billion in 30 years, ultimately billions-fold.
Kurzweil has projected where this acceleration will go and sees it culminating in something he calls the singularity. He's written a book called The Singularity is Near, in which he outlines how this coming singularity is going to affect our civilization.
By 2012, we'll have supercomputers that have at least the hardware computation of the human brain. By 2020, we'll have the hardware computation of the brain in a $1,000 computer. By 2029, we will have passed the Turing test, meaning that machines will be indistinguishable from human levels of intelligence. And it won't be a clear distinction. You won't be able to walk in a room and say, okay, humans on the right side, machines on the left. It'll be all mixed up. I mean, humans will have machine processes in their brains that will be expanding their intelligence. It'll be very hard to find biological humans that aren't enhanced with technology. You'll have software humans that are based on human intelligence but are not biological. It won't be a clear distinction between the two, and you won't be able to tell the difference. And as you get to the 2030s and 2040s, it's going to be all mixed up, and the action's going to be principally non-biological, and it's going to be all out of the web. By 2045, we'll have multiplied our intelligence collectively 1 billion-fold. That's a really profound rupture in the fabric of human history. And that brings us to the singularity. Because once we can multiply our intelligence, which is really the most powerful phenomena in the world, because if you have intelligence, you can solve problems, and we've already used our intelligence to solve a lot of problems. But if we can multiply it 1 billion-fold, say, that'll be a very profound transformation. So profound that it's really hard to see beyond that event horizon. So we've borrowed this metaphor from physics, where singularity is a point of infinite density and there's an event horizon around it that you can't easily see beyond, to apply it to this future historical occurrence, which will happen, by my estimation, around 2045. We will so profoundly change the course of history by multiplying human intelligence 1 billion-fold that it's really hard to see beyond that event horizon.
The singularity, the point where technological progress becomes so rapid that it is hard to accurately predict beyond it.
So far, Kurzweil's predictions of technological progress based on his research have been spot on. He accurately predicted the advent of the personal computer, the ubiquity of social networking, the widespread use of wireless portable electronics, and he even accurately predicted the Berlin Wall would fall 12 years prior to it happening, because information broadcast to portable radios would lead to democratic uprising. And now he predicts that the acceleration towards this technological singularity will soon begin with the next step in evolution, the merger of technology with human intelligence.
Today what we're experiencing is what I call the fifth epoch, which is biological intelligence is mastering its own intelligence, putting it into its tools, into our technology, and then merging with that. In my view, this future epoch is we're going to transcend biology. Now, people sometimes call that transhumanist, meaning beyond human. But I actually think we're going to retain our humanity, because I define humanity by the ability to create art and have relationships and be creative, and be funny, and all these endearing, positive qualities of human beings that we're going to retain. In fact, we're going to reinforce that. We're going to be funnier. We're going to be able to create greater art. We're going to be more intelligent. So we're going to remain human and even more representative of what the best qualities of human are. But we're going to transcend the limitations of being biological. Billions of times more intelligent. We will have greatly extended human longevity. So it's going to be a post-biological period. So all of the trends that will multiply the intelligence of our civilization by continuing the exponential progression of information technology beyond human levels are well established now. So 2012 is kind of the beginning of this progression.
The time frame for the beginning of this transition to the next phase of evolution is the same in both Kalaman and Kurzweil's theories. As well, Kurzweil's model of the epochs of evolution shows 5 distinct stages of evolution prior to the final phase. This mirrors the 5 Mayan world ages that came prior to December 21st, 2012, which their myths portray end in a transcending of death and the beginning of a new age where all of humanity is connected as one mind.
Cell phones, internet, computers, global communications, all of these things link us all together. All of these things give us a group emotional field. All of these things give us shared experiences for the first time in history as a global mind, as a planet.
We are moving towards the kind of vision these prophecies describe. They don't describe it technologically, but we can describe how that works technologically, but that is the direction we're moving. So in one sense, we'll all become one mind because we'll all be tied into this one vast network of communications and computation and intelligence that exists out on the web. We'll also be able to keep our individuality. That's kind of a paradox. We'll be individual and we'll be one big mind at the same time.
The confluence of the predictions for civilization's future in these two theories makes Kalaman's theory the only 2012 theory that is both based on the Mayan record and their belief system, that also corresponds to current trends that can be measured and supported scientifically.
I do believe that what will happen is that a new stage for life will occur.
I went into looking for the true reason the Mayans ended their calendar on December 21st, 2012, because the mainstream media and books by so-called experts were claiming it was the date the Mayans had marked an inevitable doomsday for our civilization. And why wouldn't people wonder whether these claims might be true? Because we are living in a time where the population is exploding, the climate is changing, our resources are dwindling, massive earthquakes and tsunamis are on the rise, the global economy is collapsing, and wars are already being fought over usable land, energy sources, and drinkable water. With the end of the Mayan calendar landing right in the middle of all this turmoil, being touted as a prophesized doomsday, it's no wonder that intelligent people looking at their world around them would wonder whether the Mayans knew something about this time that we don't.
More people are worried about the future and what might happen because they can see around them the world falling apart. We have to do something. And the Maya calendar is a good metaphor for that they saw an end to a cycle, and we see an end to all sorts of things.
When I did look into why the Mayans ended their calendar now, what I found is that it did have to do with all these things, but not in the way that was being portrayed. Because as we've seen on our journey, the Mayans did not predict events. They forecasted the upcoming qualities of time on their calendar to best take advantage of the opportunities that those time periods offered.
That's what their whole art of prophecy was based on, the qualities of time.
Living in sync with those qualities of time was the main focus of their civilization. And they looked all the way forward to this time now on their calendar. And they foresaw that it would be a time full of turmoil and struggle as we transition to a new age.
Basically, they were saying that the years around 2012 would be a time of great transformation. And certainly, look around us today. I mean, our time is unparalleled as a time of great transformation. 50 years ago, we did not have space flight. We did not have computers or this communication grid that we live in.
So, from the Mayan perspective, the strife and turmoil going on around us are not signs that the end is near. They are the cries of death of this worn-out old age of rule by force we are leaving, as Seven Macaw now dies, and the birth pangs of a new age dawning, as one Hunahpu is reborn, and we realize our connection with all things.
The intention of the process, you might say, from a cosmic perspective, is to shift into unity consciousness. But once that happens, it will affect all life, it will affect all the social structures and economic structures of our civilization. Then all of these barriers and boundaries that have been upholding these kind of dominant systems will crumble, like the Berlin Wall.
And amazingly, that is exactly what seems to be happening now. Information technology is taking control away from corrupt systems of power, putting it in the hands of the swelling youth population of the world, as it spreads ideas faster and more freely than ever before possible, leading to democratic revolutions all over the world. This is not a global political movement, it is one of the effects expanding technology is having on our civilization.
The Mayans certainly didn't know about the technology we would have at this time. They were consumed with understanding the qualities of time. But ironically, our civilization today is at the brink of collapse on multiple fronts, while at the same time, a wave of exponential technological progress has begun that could transform civilization as we know it. Could all this happening now, right when the Mayans ended their calendar to mark the transition to a new age to occur, really be just a coincidence?
There are no coincidences, so you figure that out.
It may be that there was an intuitive sense of this acceleration and exponential growth because you could see it, 1,000 years ago. It was slow at that point, but if you had enough insight and intuition, you could see that there was exponential growth and acceleration, and if you think about where that would lead, you would get to a point of very rapid growth around now.
We are so lucky to be alive right now. We are really, speaking of the Fibonacci spiral, we are literally at that point when the spiral goes into the nexus point in the very center. And I believe that the actual mechanism of evolution, which is causing this spiral of time acceleration to bring us to the apotheosis of our civilization.
Perhaps Sean David Morton is right that the 260 Khattuns that made up this world age were measuring the time span of civilization's gestation as a macrocosm of the 260 days of human gestation.
It's the birth of our next age as a civilization, the beam of light, if you will, that creates the ideas and the concept of what's going to happen next.
From the time when this age began on the Mayan long count calendar, and the first civilizations formed around the world, to now when this age is ending on that calendar, civilization has changed immensely. Ancient dirt trade routes once traveled by foot have been replaced by freeways, rail lines, and intercontinental jet flight. Ancient stone cities that were once capitals to 14 million people on Earth have given way to megacities of steel and glass that never sleep from the activity of 7 billion people alive today. And the spread of information through handwritten texts and spoken word that once took weeks and even months to travel now moves at the speed of light. All this has led to a point now where civilization has become so complex and advanced that it may now be about to spawn a new phase of evolution.
Time itself is shrinking because we as a civilization we get to such a level of complexity where time shrinks down, connectivity goes up, and time accelerates, and all these things are curves, they're not flat lines.
It becomes so explosive compared to present reality that we won't be able to follow the progress. It'll be so fast unless we enhance ourselves by merging with the technology.
And this evolutionary merger may not be voluntary, as our civilization has become so complex that it may no longer be able to back away from what it has created and force itself into the next phase of its evolution or face collapse.
There's something called sustainable equilibrium. This is a point where a planet of a given size, certain population, certain growth rate, certain resource base, and a certain rate of consumption, which is in a state of flux driven by economics. All these things mixed together crosses the point where it no longer can replenish itself. It actually starts to lose. That point was passed in 1985-86.
Will these emerging technologies offer the hope of solving these problems?
So in order to cross that threshold to the next level of systems management, it's going to require a kind of a system-level symbiosis with this sort of like artificial life form-like system that we then co-evolve with. That completely changes the dynamic. The voluntary aspect goes away.
This is really the only salvation we have. Only technology has a scale to solve the large problems that we face today. There's still a lot of suffering in the world, and I think we have a responsibility to apply these tools to overcoming those problems.
And to be fair, why would we not use these emerging tools where they are needed? If Kurzweil's projections are right, this coming merger of technology with human life has the potential to create a utopian world better than we can possibly imagine, to end disease, suffering, poverty, and even death.
We're in the process of translating ourselves from offline organic beings into online semi-digital beings. Now, in a way, that's really positive because that's a promise of immortality right there. That we can regenerate our limbs, that we can create new appendages, that we can live for potentially 1,000 years. But are we going to live as slaves for that 1,000 years, or are we going to live as free beings? That's the big question. That's up to us right now, and that's what we're in the process of sorting out right now.
So in this new era, it will be of utmost importance to ensure future technologies are used in positive ways, because they will also have the potential to destroy us, or worse, to create a rift so great between the haves and have-nots that the human race could literally bifurcate into a genetically altered race of ultra-wealthy, super-intelligent elites who control technology, and the poor, unaltered masses who are left behind in history, or worse, who are enslaved by it.
There are downsides of all of these technologies. I mean, technology is a double-edged sword. I mean, I'm optimistic, but I mean, you can go back to fire and stone tools, and we've used all of our tools to extend our creative work as well as our destructive capacity. And these future technologies are the same. The real answer is not to relinquish these technologies, but to practice them in safe ways by following ethical standards, and to develop technological immune systems that actually protect us from people who would willfully abuse them.
I feel like there's a race going on, sort of. And the race says the following. If the kind of dark side types get their claws on this first and they use it for their own purposes, it's going to be pretty dark pretty fast. On the other hand, if the right kind of folks sort of get into this and put in more focused effort, we could possibly change things in a really big and beautiful way.
This time now, then, would be the most important time in human history to be alive, as it will be those of us alive today who bear the responsibility of shaping the future of our species, not on a design of fate or by nature any longer, but by our own design. And this is why the Mayans spent so much time forecasting upcoming time periods, because nobody in the end can predict what the future has in store. And using the opportunities that qualities of time brought with them to their advantage gave the Mayans a degree of control in determining what the future held in store.
The Maya did not believe in an unchangeable fate. They may have thought that there was an end to the calendar. They may have thought that time was going to be troubled, but they also believed that we had will and that we could do something about it. And the more we take our own future into our hands, the better our life is going to be. And the Maya believed that too.
That is what made the Mayans the masters of time. And if we are wise, perhaps we can follow their lead and take advantage of this great turning point in history when all the qualities of time manifest at once, and use that influence, that opportunity to our advantage, to make our world into the one we want it to be. If we can make it through this time, through this transition successfully, then what lies on the horizon is the realization of our full potential as a species, the transcending of all the limitations that have held us back thus far, and the manifestation of things greater than we can now even imagine. And if we do create such a glorious future for ourselves, after all the fuss and worry over whether the end of the Mayan calendar marked doomsday for our civilization, how ironic will it be if the Mayan calendar, which never even ended at all, was actually measuring the time it would take our civilization to gestate to this point now, when as a civilization we are not about to end at all, but in fact, we are being born.